Hey viewers, my name's Cara. I have another sort of book review for you today. I don't know why I said sort of. It is a book review, I guess, because I'm talking about a book that I read. I'm pre-recording this in the sense that by the time you see it, it will not have just been recorded. You'll probably be seeing this a couple of weeks down the line. But the reason that I'm recording it right now and the reason that I read this book right now, although I was not planning to get to it for another few weeks, is that the book is due back at the library tomorrow morning. And I found this out yesterday. So I read this book today and a little bit last night so that I can give it back to the library, get it on to the next person, which is a really exciting thing because it means that other people in my area, in the Cleveland area of Ohio, are also excited to read this book. You already know what it is because the name is in the title of this video, but we are talking about Weave the Liminal by Laura Tempest Zakroff. The full title is Weave the Liminal, Living Modern Traditional Witchcraft. It is a book talking about what Tempest calls the modern tradition of witchcraft, or being a modern traditional witch. So as you can imagine, the first couple of chapters deal with things like discussing what does it mean to be traditional and what do we mean by tradition? What does it mean to be modern in this context? And then of course also defining what it means to be a witch. What do people mean by that word and other such things that you would anticipate from a book that says it's about modern traditional witchcraft. So we're going to talk about all of those things. So this is a beginner appropriate book, I would say, because it definitely covers some basic things such as what I just mentioned. What do we mean when we say traditional or talk about traditions of witchcraft? What do we mean by witchcraft? What does that entail? And it is also not a book that has any sort of prerequisites in that you can start reading this book without knowing anything yet about witchcraft. There's nothing really in here that expects you to already know anything. So in that regard, I would say this is a beginner appropriate book, and it is written with that in mind, and that is mentioned within the book. However, I would say, just as the book says of itself, this is not your typical book about witchcraft. I would say that it is not your typical beginner witchcraft book. What I mean by a typical beginner witchcraft book, having to define our terms here as we use them, is that a lot of the books out there on the market that are intended for beginner witches or to teach people how to be a witch from ground zero, day one, include a lot of different things that this book does not include. This is not a spell book. It does not give you spells that you can flip to a page and follow Tempest's instructions to start doing magic. It does not have tables of correspondences or the different meanings of colors, candles, symbols, anything like that. Tempest has another book called Sigil Witchery. It says right here, author of Sigil Witchery. And that one is definitely more about symbols. But, those typical kind of tables and charts of correspondences and what things mean and learning all of those basic things that we can then build into spellcraft or magic, that's not what this book is. So in that regard, it is not like any of those other things that we tend to label beginner witch books. However, it is beginner appropriate. So I was really excited about reading this book because I love Laura Tempest Zakroff's blogs on Patheos or Patheos. I still don't know how to pronounce that name, but they are one of the various bloggers from Patheos that I've always found myself just drawn to certain blogs based on their title, what the topic appears to be about. And so I'll click on the titles that interest me. And Tempest is one of the authors of those blogs that I keep coming back to, and I'm always finding their name on the byline, So of all of the things that I read, I tend to really like and resonate with Tempest's writing. And the book is definitely no exception to that. So I was really excited to read it because of that, essentially, that I know I like their work. I've never read any of their other books yet. I've read little snippets of other things that they've written, but I had not read any of the other books, so this is the first one. And also just really excited to read it because it's a brand new book. It came out this year. It is copyright 2019, so that is why actually it still has the new sticker on it from the library system. And when I originally had put in an order to get a whole bunch of books from the library, this book did not come in. It was not available in the library system because it was so new. The library didn't have it yet. But I guess they already had it on order. So they did place a hold on it, and then it was basically just like I pre-ordered it. So as soon as the library got a copy, it got sent to me. And so when I found out it was due back at the library tomorrow morning, so because someone else had placed a hold on it, so I was not allowed to renew it in that case. Normally I would be able to renew it for another 3 weeks, but someone else placed a hold, which means they're waiting to read this. I really wanted to read it today before sending it back off, because now I can say I was the first person to read this copy of this book. So that's kind of a fun thing. But yeah, I just want to tell you a couple of my favorite things. I took notes as I read this because it's a library copy. I have not purchased my own copy yet. So whenever that happens, I tend to take notes in a notebook so that I can remember the various things that I thought while reading, and also just remember the various things that are covered or touched on in the book. So Tempest has excellent metaphors. Oh my gosh, some of the best metaphors ever. Like, I love a good metaphor. I am all about the clear, concise, creative ways of explaining things. They're just so good. Like, I don't want to spoil the book for you. Are there spoilers for things like this? No. But so I don't want to like tell you what all of them were, but just one, for example, comparing initiation versus self-dedication, things like that. Comparing initiation into a group to going to private school, and initiation by the spirit as being like being homeschooled, and that they're both completely valid methods of education, and they ideally will get you to the same end goal, but they are very different experiences and work differently and work better for different people. It's like, what? That's amazing. There's surfing metaphors. There are jellyfish metaphors. The metaphors are fantastic in this book. Just great. As Danny Lang at Esoteric Moment mentioned in their review of this book when it first came out earlier this year, there are definitely some levels of snark in this book. That is the word that Danny used, because it is a word that Tempest uses in the book, I think only once, but it is there. There is definitely a sense of a unique voice and, you know, the author's unique take on explaining things, and it's the same kind of voice that is evident, of course, in their blogs as well. But, you know, it's always interesting for me reading through books these days and seeing them use very contemporary, like current slang and acronyms and like things like the word totes and saying noms and things like that. Like, it just always makes me laugh because I know exactly what it means. Like, this is our language of today. This is how we speak. But it makes me laugh when I see it in print, like in an actual book, not just on the internet, because I'm like, 10 years from now, people are going to read this, and who knows, is the slang going to be the same? It'll be interesting to find out. So I always find that really fun. There's some great acronyms in this book talking about the different elements that go into creating your own personal authentic practice. Authentic meaning what is right for you and what is true to yourself. So the acronym RITES, RITES, is used. It stands for Roots, Inspiration, Time, Environment, and STAR. STAR being kind of your guiding compass and your direction, sense of guidance. I copied down in my notes a lot of the different lists that are in this book. I love lists, okay? So there's another thing, but talking about the different stages of growth of like that people go through, not only in witchcraft and paganism, but also Tempest talks about seeing it in students of dance, and I'm sure even students of art, all different types of things. We go through these stages of growth, that there's like the beginner, bright-eyed, really excited, eager to learn everything, open about the fact that they know nothing. And then a little bit after that, there's the stage where we're like so passionate about what we're learning. It's the best thing in the world. Everything else that's different is wrong. And like, we're very quick to tell people that. Like, you're wrong, you're doing it wrong because this is what I'm learning. Everything else is wrong. This is the way. And I'm sure we can all remember going through that phase. I certainly do. And then the other two stages of development, I love this because I read the third stage and I was like, oh my God, that's me. Oh my God, it's me. The third stage is the intermediate stage of just constantly swinging between confidence and insecurity, constantly like wanting to prove that you are, you know, a valid and vital part of this community, that you know what you're talking about, but then also constantly having this fear that other people are going to think that you're absolutely like out of touch and have no idea what you're talking about. And I was like, oh my God, that's me. But then the last stage is the stage where we calm the fuck down and we realize that we don't know everything, and that's okay, and we freely admit when we don't know something, and we're just eager to learn and very open to new ideas. And that's when I realized, no, that's me. That's definitely me. So then I was just like, oh my God, I am a mixture between the third and fourth stage of growth. Like, me on a good day is stage 4. Like, everything's chill. Me on a bad day is stage 3, like imposter syndrome. So that was really helpful to me. Thank you, Tempest. That's amazing. I wrote down the 3 rules for living. I wrote down the list of different types of rituals because that's just really interesting to me, because there are terms that Tempest uses that I've never thought about. Like, we always talk about how rituals have different purposes, and there are different reasons for doing different types of magic, for example. And some of the terms that Tempest uses and lists are just terms that I haven't heard before. So I think it's cool to have like different vocabulary and terms to talk about these different things. And of course, the book is called Weave the Liminal. So another thing that it spends some time talking about, really beginning with chapter 5, is the liminal. And what does that mean? What is liminal space? I really appreciate that so often when introducing a concept, Tempest is just like, let's look at the dictionary definition and start from there, because that's how my mind works as well. So I personally really appreciate that. And then talking about how those definitions either directly inform what we're doing or the limitations that we realize those definitions have. And that when you look something up on Google or Webster or anything like that, sometimes the definitions were not created with communities like witchcraft and neo-paganism in mind. So certain definitions might seem like they exclude us, but instead of not using that word, we kind of just have to realize that the definition of those words is bigger and broader than what mainstream society thinks it is, because we're not always included in those definitions when they are made. So I really appreciate the definitions. Wrote down some quotes that I loved. I literally wrote here, Tempest has great metaphors. That's in my notebook. Absolutely great. The etiquette for interacting with different people in the community, and also just interacting with the world in general, is really good to keep in mind. Not just for going to public ritual and going to pagan events, but just good life skills, life tips, good stuff. Yeah. So the structure of the book, I guess to make this a little bit more of like a review, and so you might know what to expect. I read the Google book preview months ago as soon as I found out about the book because I was so excited about it. So I read the Google book preview forever ago. And there's a good amount in there, so I definitely recommend that you check that out if you want to see a little bit more before you decide to pick up a copy of the book. But it is 6 chapters, which seems like not a lot, and obviously I was able to just read it pretty much in one day. Granted, that's all I did today, other than take breaks to read and warm up my tea, and, whatever else I had to do. Talk to people a little bit about the book, mainly. I was taking pictures of certain excerpts and sending them to people, I love this book. Tempest is awesome. We love you, Tempest. But 6 chapters doesn't seem like a lot, but the middle 3 chapters, chapter 3, 4, and 5, are really quite, I was gonna say deep, but I don't mean they're really deep. I mean that they're really full of information, as opposed to the first 2 chapters talk about your basics. What is traditional? What is modern? What is witchcraft? Chapter 3, 4, and 5 really get into a lot more in-depth stuff. They're much longer than either of the first 2 chapters. And then chapter 6 is also shorter again compared to 3, 4, and 5, kind of wrapping things up, moving it into the future. That's the practical concerns kind of area of the book. But yeah, it's it's just over 200 pages total. So book length-wise, it's not many more pages than Witchcraft Activism by David Salisbury, which I had done a review of previously and talked about how I read it over the course of 3 days, reading one section each day. But this is a significantly bigger book. The pages are bigger. It's a bit thicker, even though it's not many more pages. There's more on a page, if that makes sense. So yeah, I was able to read it in a day just because I gave myself a deadline because it's due back at the library tomorrow, and I'm a fairly quick reader. But also, there's a lot of the things in it that I feel like definitely deserve a lot more time to read and absorb and think about, maybe before you continue on reading the next part of the book. A lot of that stuff is actually stuff that I've already been thinking and mulling over in my own life and in my own practice for months now. So instead of seeing a lot of the things in the book and being wow, that's really interesting, I want to take some time to absorb that before I move on to the next section of the book. It was more me just being yes, thank you, I've been thinking the same thing. And I literally put in my notes little arrows in the margins pointing to a specific note saying yes, thank you, Tempest, or oh my god, I really needed to hear this right now. So yeah, so all of those things combined are reasons why I was able to get through the book rather quickly. But I can definitely see it being something that you want to spend a couple weeks going through. It's also not like other beginner witchcraft books in that there are no rituals or practices in the book to sit down and follow and do. This book is not a how-to step-by-step guide. It's inspiration and overall guidance for how to approach your path. So I would say I definitely recommend this book to anyone who identifies as a witch in any way, who identifies with modernizing their path in any way. Not saying that you have to identify as a modern traditional witch, but if you are like me and someone who likes to bring your practice into the modern world, you're not trying to recreate exactly anything that's happened in the past, there are a lot of topics in this book that are very much for today, for right now, for the types of concerns that we are expressing as a community the types of causes and topics that are very important to many of us. And so I definitely recommend it to you, whether you are a newer practitioner or a more seasoned practitioner. Another thing I love in the book is Tempest talks about the difference between a practitioner and a participant, just terminology. I love. So I love having words to things, even though, as the book points out, of course, there are so many things about this realm that we really just can't put into words, and ultimately that's okay. But it's definitely fun when we have words, and it's easier to communicate with one another when we have a word in common that we know the feeling that goes along with it. So I really appreciate those discussions of different terminologies and things. But I was going to say, I would definitely recommend this book to a beginner. I think that there are a lot of important tips, tricks, and just overall kind of like mindset conceptualization type stuff in this book that would be very helpful to know. That like if I had known these things and been able to actually understand them and grasp them when I was a beginner as a preteen, this stuff would have been really helpful for me to know at the get-go. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things that, like I said, that were in the book that I've just recently started thinking about and mulling over in my own practice over the past several months, like this year. If I had been mulling over these things a decade ago because I had read this book when I first started, who knows where I would be now, So I definitely recommend it for beginners. I think there's some good stuff in here that could help you maybe get ahead of the curve on some interesting concepts being introduced to you through this book. But as I have said also, it is not a how-to type book. So I'm sure Tempest would even say, or does say in the book, I don't remember, I read it through so quickly. This definitely can't be the only book that you read, nor should any book be the only book that you read. So I recommend it for beginners. Yes. End of sentence. Done. Thank you very much for watching. It is a darker video because I finished reading the book at 9:30 p.m. my time. I wanted to go ahead and record a video now so that I had the book in hand to show you and reference. It's got to go back to the library tomorrow so that it can be on its way to the next reader who will enjoy it and hopefully get so much good stuff out of it. Definitely check out Tempest's blog on Pathos. Check out their other books. I will also be checking out their other books eventually in the future, but I have so many other things to read right now. You all saw the video several videos ago on my channel talking about the stack of books that I'm reading currently. Yeah, I'm still working through that. So I'm glad that so many of you are bookworms like me and love hearing me talk about books. Thank you so much, Tempest, for creating this book and letting it be in the world. Thank you to Llewellyn Publications. This is a Llewellyn Publications book. And thank you all for watching and or listening to this video. Let me know if you've already read Weave the Liminal in the comments. Let me know if you have not, but you're interested. Whatever you have to comment on, put it in the comments. And I'll see you next time. Until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.